When the 1900s made their way into the 80s, there was one gaming company that was on top: Atari. Their arcade games were some of the best you could play in those days, and they were just gaining ground in the home as their VCS consoles started to really sell when their port of Space Invaders was released to it. By 1982, Atari was growing fast. They had the best games and the best home system, but the threat of growing competition in the console market prompted them to make a big step to keep gamers on their side. And that was to introduce a new system that would carry on the VCS legacy while being superior and towering over any threat on the horizon. When it seemed that Atari couldn't do any wrong, they made a drastic misstep with this supposed successor. It's the Atari 5200. Atari had the means of making an innovative system, there was no doubt about it. They had all the tools, technology, and know-how to do it, but some things are just not meant to be. The Atari 5200 was released in November of 1982 as the heir apparent to the newly christened 2600. I mean, they were right to think that it was technically superior to it, so much so that they decided to call it the Advanced Video Entertainment System. Now that's one way to call it, but Atari makes the claim convincing by showing off many pictures of people having fun with gameplay, the console itself and its contents, plus touting any more additional features and info, plus the model number on the bottom. If this box setup looks familiar to you, you wouldn't be wrong. The VCS would adopt the same palette once it was given its new numeric name. So without a doubt, the box must have done something right. The flaps on this massive box, seriously they're bigger than my hand, have nothing more than a picture of the console with the logo right next to it, along with the rainbow streak on the bottom. Pretty sure this was during the time most companies had embraced the rainbow, but the back of the box has a crap ton of stuff to look at. I mean, look at all the information that revolves around the console, its new features, what comes with it, and even the controller. There is dread in my voice. Some will understand. If you don't now, you will soon. The back also goes over the potential categories of games you could play on the 5200. Not sure what classics could be, but I know that rainbow style font looks oddly familiar. Can't forget about the additional family photo next to the Atari logo. Always have to have that. But we've had our fun looking at pictures of the 5200. Now let's fling the box aside and have a closer look at the system itself. I think it's hard to really show how humongous the system is, but you can see it barely gets into frame. The 5200 was made with Atari 8-bit computer hardware, so maybe they had to use this big design to fit all the components in, or just wanted to reuse the case from the canceled 2700. The design in any case looks very futuristic. While mostly black, it has a silver middle that has the console's name with a rainbow line next to the Atari logo. The only non-futuristic thing about it is its open cartridge slot. The 2600 cartridge slot had a mechanism to keep the pins shut and away from dust, but this didn't for whatever reason. Gotta put a loose game inside for the purpose of protecting the pins from dust. On the front is the controller ports, all 4 of them, which is wild for the time. I can't even think of any games that used all 4 ports, but this was common with most 5200s. There was, however, a 2-port version, which will come into play later. Now, what are you able to plug into these ports? Well, why not lift the storage door and grab from the tray one of the worst controllers in the history of video games? This right here is what made the 5200 fail. Maybe. I mean, it had its many faults and it didn't work for a long time, but in today's world there are some life hacks to make it good. I'll leave you with that to tune into the AC review, but let's put the controller back in the tray and get back to the console. Not much to see on the sides or the back, but the bottom has more going for it. Here we can see several foot pads and screws, an Atari logo underneath a sticker with model and serial info, plus the channel 3 and 4 switch, and whatever this part is. But the main talking point is going to involve the very lengthy RF cord. Now, it was common to have this cord be long so you can have it closer to you to hit that all-important power button, but it wasn't as common to see it plug into its own custom box. And by going through the box's insides, we can find the TV antenna switch box. This thing is an anomaly to video games and switch boxes in general. For those uneducated, switch boxes were used in this sense to switch between the TV signal to the console, which is exactly what this does, but Atari decided to take it a step farther. Instead of just plugging in the RF connector, you must also plug in the power adapter as well as the RF connector. But maybe you should do it in the opposite order. The point is that this box was able to not only take the 5200 signal to the TV, but also give the system power. This is absolutely mind-boggling. I don't even know logically how that could work. Not a lot of other people did either when it was new, so after a year Atari revised the system to have a more conventional separation of the power and the RF, and that version was the 2 controller port version, which is pretty rare to find, but you'll be fortunate to find it, so you can avoid this hookup. The only other system to use a setup of this type was the RCA Studio 2, and that's a weird comparison to even make. Nonetheless, we have everything ready, so I guess we should look at the games. I mean, if we can. You see, I wasn't kidding when I said the controller was utter garbage that you could barely play any of the games on here. Which is a shame because there are some awesome ports to this system, including a better version of Pac-Man. Other favorites of mine include Kix, Q*bert, Pole Position, Pengo, and a whole lot more. The library was more than decent. It'll just take you getting over this crap-ass controller in order to enjoy it fully. There are ways to make a shit sandwich good. The Atari 5200 had a lot of promise but ultimately failed due to one very important feature damaging the whole reputation of the system. It wouldn't take long for Atari to revert back to keeping the 2600 going, and the 5200 would ultimately see its end in 1984. But that doesn't mean it's dead for good. Its homebrew scene is actually doing great, and the hardcore collectors are keeping this thing fresh in everyone's memories. I personally like the 5200, mostly because of its library and not the controller, but believe it or not, there are simple ways to get this terrible, putrid controller to work, which I will or did explain in the AC review. You'll just have to watch it and see. But if you happen to come across the Atari 5200 for a price that's too good to be true, I would say think about it. If you just want to play it casually, this wouldn't be for you. But for a collector who's looking for a glimpse at Atari's might and one of the factors to their fall, this is a good start. It's the Atari 5200. In the heat of rising competition, you can only have 2 choices in mind. Either innovate over your competitor or copy from them. There's been a lot of examples of cloning in the industry, mostly during the Pong days, but there is one example during the handheld war, and on the next episode we'll be taking a look at Watara's monochrome vision that absolutely looks nothing like the Game Boy. If you think I missed anything, please leave a comment. If you like what you see, leave a like. If you think others could get knowledge out of this, share this video. And if you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. Now, if you'll excuse me, nostalgia is calling.